The spring of 1945 was a season of paradox. In the public squares of London and Paris, the atmosphere was one of impending liberation. But behind a barbed wire of Allied prisoner-of-war camps, a different, more desperate story was unfolding. By March 1945, Great Britain held hundreds of thousands of German prisoners. The war was effectively won, yet for the guards and the captives, the tension had never been higher. To understand why British guards, men generally known for a fair play approach to captivity, resorted to violence in the tunnels and interrogation rooms of 1945, we must first look at the psychological state of the nation. The British public had just endured 6 years of total war, the Blitz, and the terrifying V-1 and V-2 rocket attacks. As Allied troops pushed into Germany, the first horrifying images of the concentration camps began to filter back to the UK. The enemy was no longer just a soldier in a different uniform. For many, the enemy had become a symbol of absolute depravity. In this climate, 2 distinct types of tunnels became the flashpoints for violence. The first were the literal escape tunnels dug by desperate German officers in camps like Island Farm in Wales. The second were the metaphorical tunnels of the secret interrogation centers, places like the notorious London cage, where the light of the Geneva Convention rarely reached. On the night of March 10, 1945, at Island Farm Camp 198 in Bridgend, Wales, the largest German POW escape of the war occurred. 70 German prisoners crawled through a 60-foot tunnel they had painstakingly excavated under Hut 9. The discovery of this tunnel and the subsequent manhunt triggered a visceral reaction from the British guards. Historically, the British had prided themselves on treating POWs with a level of dignity that they hoped their own captured boys were receiving in Germany. However, by March 1945, that reciprocity had vanished. The guards at Island Farm were under immense pressure. The war was nearly over. An escape of this magnitude was seen not just as a security failure, but as a humiliation. When the tunnel was discovered and the remaining prisoners were hauled out, accounts suggest the professionalism of the guards fractured. German accounts from the period allege that those caught in the vicinity of the tunnel, where those suspected of helping, were met with rough handling that went beyond standard military restraint. The violence in these tunnels was often a product of raw, late-war nerves, a combination of exhaustion, the shock of the escape, and a burgeoning hatred for a regime that refused to surrender even as its cities fell. While the violence in the escape tunnels of Wales was often spontaneous, the violence in the interrogation tunnels of London was systematic. Located in the heart of Kensington, the London cage was a secret MI-19 facility. It was here that the most hardcore Nazis and SS officers were brought for questioning. The facility was commanded by Colonel Alexander Scotland, a man who believed that the Geneva Convention was a luxury the world could no longer afford when dealing with war criminals. Inside the London cage, the tunnels were the narrow corridors and soundproof basement rooms where prisoners were subjected to what was officially called special intelligence treatment. Recent declassified documents and the memoirs of Alexander Scotland himself, parts of which were censored for decades, reveal a harrowing picture. Prisoners were forced to stand to attention for 26 hours at a time. They were deprived of sleep, beaten during interrogations, and forced to undergo humiliating exercises in the middle of the night. Why did the British guards and interrogators do this? The justification was always the greater good. In 1945, the British were desperate to find the locations of werewolf partisan units, the blueprints for secret weapons, and the identities of those responsible for the Holocaust. The guard at the London cage didn't see themselves as torturers. They saw themselves as cleaners, scrubbing the world of a mess the Nazis had made. This moral decoupling allowed for a level of brutality that would have been unthinkable in 1940. The violence of 1945, whether it was the frantic beating of an escapee in a Welsh field or the calculated punch of an interrogator in a Kensington basement, marked a dark transition in British military history. It was the moment when the gentleman's war died. By late 1945, as the dust settled, the British government moved quickly to bury these incidents. The London cage was closed, and Colonel Scotland was eventually discouraged from publishing the full details of his methods. The escape at Island Farm was relegated to a local curiosity rather than a national scandal. However, the question remains, why did they do it? The answer lies in the unique pressure of the war's final months. It was a period of moral exhaustion. The guards were tired of the killing, tired of the secrets, and increasingly radicalized by the horrors they were discovering in the liberated camps of the East. The tunnels of 1945 became the place where the British sense of fair play met the reality of a world that had been broken by total war. Today, Hut 9 at Island Farm stands as a museum, and the mansions of Kensington Palace Gardens are among the most expensive homes in the world. The screams in the tunnels have long since faded, but the history remains, a reminder than the shadow of victory. Even the victors can lose their way.